My name is Reese Dunbar, and I am 34 years old. The day my ex-husband's company lost the legal right to manufacture their most profitable product line was a Thursday in October, and I know that because it was the same Thursday I had finally worked up the nerve to drive out to the Maplewood Business Park on the west side of Cincinnati to collect a handful of boxes I'd left behind. Personal things, mostly. A framed photograph my grandmother had given me the year I graduated from Ohio State. Some technical reference books I'd used constantly before I stopped being allowed to use them. A drafting set I'd had since my first year of graduate school that I kept telling myself I'd go back for and never did. I wasn't expecting anyone to make it hard. The divorce had been finalized in February 8 months earlier. The attorneys had finished everything. I figured I would sign in at the front desk, take the elevator to the third floor where the design suite had been my workspace for 4 years, fill 2 boxes and leave without running into a single person who made me feel the way that building used to make me feel by the end. I almost made it. My sister-in-law was standing at the reception desk when I came through the glass lobby doors, speaking to the receptionist in the particular tone she reserved for people she considered subordinate, which was nearly everyone. Imogen had always carried herself like someone who expected rooms to rearrange themselves when she entered them. She was 5 years older than me, sharp in the way that comes from decades of being the most important woman in a room full of people who agreed with her, and she had never bothered to hide the fact that she thought her brother had made an error in judgment when he married me. She hadn't always said it directly, but she'd said enough. At Griffin's family Christmas dinner, our second year of marriage, she had called me Griffin's little design project in front of 9 people while passing the bread basket, and Griffin had laughed the way he always did, and I had smiled and said nothing, the way I always did. I had spent years believing that if I were patient enough, accommodating enough, productive enough, eventually it would translate into something that felt like being seen. She noticed me the second I stepped inside. Whatever she had been saying to the receptionist stopped mid-sentence. The expression that moved across her face wasn't surprise. It was closer to satisfaction, the look of someone who had been waiting for a particular situation, and was pleased it had finally presented itself. "What are you doing here?" she said, not a question, more like a border-crossing announcement. I told her I'd come to pick up some personal things I'd left in the design suite. "That suite has been cleared," she said, taking 2 steps toward me in a way that was clearly meant to make me take 2 steps back. "I didn't. That whole wing has been repurposed. There's nothing up there that belongs to you anymore." She paused, letting that land. "I'm going to need you to leave. This is a private facility. You don't work here. You're not on the board. You are not a member of this family. So I'm going to ask you one more time, what exactly do you think you're doing here?" The receptionist had gone completely still. A man near the elevator bank was staring at his phone with the focused attention of someone who desperately wanted to be invisible. And something happened inside me in that moment that I had not felt in years. Not embarrassment, not the old familiar shrinking. Something almost like the opposite of that. A stillness that came from knowing exactly what I knew, which was something Imogen, for all her certainty, did not. I knew what had happened at 9 that morning when a patent database maintained by the United States Patent and Trademark Office had updated. I knew what the company's intellectual property attorney had found, waiting in his inbox at 7:45 a.m., because he was the one who had sent me a message afterward, professional and measured, asking whether I would be open to a conversation about next steps. I smiled at her, and I watched it unsettle her the way no argument could have. "I came for my drafting set," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "But since I'm here, there's something you're going to want to know before you go back upstairs." I let a breath of quiet sit between us. The Meridian license expired this morning. I didn't file the renewal. Her arms dropped slightly from where they had been crossed. "The Meridian packaging system runs on a patent," I continued, "a patent that's registered to me individually. Has been since 2018, before Griffin and I were even engaged. The exclusive licensing agreement your company signed gave you manufacturing rights for 5 years, renewable annually. I've been renewing it every year, including through the divorce proceedings, because it seemed like the decent thing to do while things were still being settled." I paused. "Everything was settled in February. The renewal window closed at midnight last night." Her mouth had opened. Nothing was coming out of it. The Meridian line is roughly 40% of the company's revenue based on last quarter's filings, I said. Your IP attorney has the paperwork. I'd call him before you call anyone else. What Imogen had never understood, what Griffin had conveniently never explained to his own sister, because it was easier to let her picture me as an accessory to his life rather than someone with a life of my own, was that the Meridian system had nothing to do with the family company when I built it. I developed it over 18 months before Griffin and I moved in together. Evenings, weekends, every spare hour I had after finishing my day job at a packaging consultancy in Kenwood. It was a sustainable, flexible packaging methodology, a reduced material system that could be applied across food service, medical supply, and consumer products with meaningful environmental and cost per unit advantages. I filed the provisional patent application myself, with my own savings, through a patent attorney I'd found through a referral from my graduate advisor at Ohio State. Griffin had known about it the entire time. He had been the one who suggested I license it to his family's company, which was struggling then under pressure from two major clients threatening to leave over sustainability concerns. I had agreed. I had offered an exclusive license at a rate well below what an outside firm would have charged, because he was my husband, because I believed in the business, because I thought we were building something that belonged to both of us. That was the version of me that existed before I understood what that house actually valued. Imogen's hand had found the edge of the reception desk and was gripping it. I could see the shift happening in real time, the expression that had been so confident 2 minutes earlier becoming something else entirely, something hollowed out. You can't just, Griffin will. Griffin doesn't have standing over my intellectual property, I said. He never did. The patent is mine. I've already spoken with my attorney, and everything is clean. There's a pathway to a new licensing agreement if the company wants one at fair market terms through a licensed intermediary. But that conversation needs to start with your IP team, not with me. I adjusted the strap of my bag. I really just came for the drafting set. But if it's gone, that's fine. I'll add it to the long list of things I'm leaving behind. I turned and walked toward the door, and I did not look back. My phone rang 43 minutes later. I was sitting in a Panera parking lot in Blue Ash, holding a coffee I'd bought mostly just to have something to do with my hands, watching the red and gold of the maples at the edge of the lot burn against an overcast sky. Griffin's name on the screen. I watched it ring twice, then answered. What did you do? Not a question. His voice was tight in the way it got when he was trying to sound in control of something he was not in control of. I didn't renew the license, I said. Reese. He stopped. I heard him exhale. Imogen called me. This could destroy us. You understand that? The Meridian line is what kept us out of bankruptcy 3 years ago. It's what brought Morrison Foods back to the table. It's what we's used to. I know what it did, I said. I built it. Then how can you do this? His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for just a moment, one brief old moment, I felt the pull of the instinct I'd spent 6 years developing, the reflex to soften, to accommodate, to find the version of the truth that would hurt him the least. And then I remembered a specific Tuesday evening in March, 6 weeks after I'd filed, when I'd sent him a detailed email asking to schedule a call about the patent renewal, and he had responded 4 days later with 3 words, talk to counsel. Not my counsel. Just talk to counsel, as though I were a vendor. I sent you 3 separate emails between March and July asking to discuss the renewal, I said. My attorney sent 2 follow-up letters. Your attorney acknowledged receipt and redirected both of them without responding to the substance. I gave you 8 months, Griffin. 8 months and multiple clear opportunities to have a conversation, and every single one of them got closed before it could start. I let that sit. I tried to handle this the quiet way. The door was open for a long time. This is personal, he said, voice shifting into something that was almost pleading. You're punishing us because of the divorce. No, I said, I'm not. Your company has over 200 employees who had nothing to do with our marriage and who have shown up and done their jobs. I've already been in contact with a licensing intermediary who can structure a new agreement that gets Meridian back into production within 90 days, at terms that are fair to everyone. Your IP attorney has the contact. That's the practical path forward if the company wants it. I paused. But Griffin, accountability isn't a punishment. It's just what happens when the protections run out and nothing was put in place to replace them. I told you that in a board meeting in 2023. I said the licensing structure needed to be renegotiated before renewal became critical. You told me to let the legal team handle it. A long silence. Reese? I have somewhere to be, I said gently. Have your attorney call mine. I set the phone down and looked back at the maple tree at the edge of the lot, entirely red by then, every single leaf. The meeting I'd mentioned was real. I drove across town to a coffee shop in Hyde Park, where I'd arranged to meet Zara Figueroa, the director of business development at a company called Arcadia Materials Group, a sustainable packaging and applied design firm headquartered in Portland that had been building out a Midwest presence for the past 2 years. Zara had reached out to me 6 weeks earlier through a mutual contact from my graduate program at Ohio State. We'd had 2 calls already. This was the third. She was already at a corner table when I arrived, a laptop open and a folder beside it, an Americano she was halfway through. She stood when she saw me, and her handshake was firm and direct, the kind I appreciated. How did this morning go? She asked. I had given her the general shape of what was happening with the licensing situation. Eventfully, I said, sitting down. She nodded once. Like that was a complete answer. The offer is the same as the last time we spoke. We want the Meridian methodology in the Arcadia portfolio, and we want you leading the applied design division. Full relocation assistance if you need it, or hybrid remote since Cincinnati's already in our region. Compensation is in the folder. She slid it toward me. What we're looking for is someone who understands sustainable packaging from every angle. Not just the design side, but manufacturing reality, client relationships, IP management. You've done all of it, independently. And frankly, the fact that you held that patent yourself and managed a commercial licensing relationship on your own terms for 5+ years tells us more about your instincts than anything a resume could say. I looked down at the number on the first page and thought about every meeting I had ever sat in where I had been talked over or left out of the room entirely. Every time Griffin had said, "Let me handle the business piece," as though the business piece were a foreign country I hadn't traveled to. Every dinner table where Imogen had made a comment, and the silence that followed had been filled by everyone at the table, except the one person I thought would speak. I have one condition, I said. Zara raised her eyebrows slightly. Arcadia's sustainability claims need to be backed by third-party supply chain audits. Not marketing language, actual independently reviewed data. If my name and my methodology are going to be publicly associated with this company, I need to know that what we say we are is what we actually are. She held my gaze for a moment. Then she reached across the table and turned the folder to a page I hadn't reached yet, a document with a header that read Independent Supply Chain Audit Summary. Arcadia Materials Group, 2019-2025. That's in the company's founding charter, she said. We've been doing it since year 1. To be honest, we've been waiting for someone to ask for it before they signed. I took the folder home with me that evening to the small rental on the east side of Cincinnati that I'd moved into after the divorce. A house with bay windows in the living room that caught the late afternoon light in a way I hadn't stopped noticing since I moved in. Smaller than anything I'd lived in during my marriage. Quieter. Mine. I signed the offer letter 12 days later at my kitchen table. Griffin's attorney reached out to mine 3 weeks after that about reopening licensing negotiations for the Meridian system. The agreement we eventually arrived at was fair. Not punitive, not generous. Accurate. Market rate for what the technology had always been worth, with review terms and oversight provisions written into the contract from the start. The things that should have been there 5 years earlier. I still don't know exactly what Imogen said after I walked out of that lobby. I've thought about it occasionally, in the idle way you think about things that no longer have any power over you. What I know is that I drove out to Maplewood Business Park that Thursday expecting a quiet errand, and I walked out of there having said, cleanly and without apology, the thing that had needed saying for years. I was never Griffin's little design project. I was never decoration in someone else's narrative. I built something real, from nothing, on my own time and with my own mind and my own resources. And that thing survived the marriage, survived the dismissals, survived 8 months of ignored emails and redirected phone calls. And it is still out in the world right now, in production, creating value that was never contingent on anyone's willingness to acknowledge where it came from. That is the part I return to most, on the days when I wonder if any of it could have gone differently. The work was always real. I simply had to stop building it in rooms where no one was going to say so. If this story landed the way I still feel it when I think back on that October morning, Do one thing before you go, hit subscribe. I have more of these. More stories about women who stopped waiting to be recognized and built something that couldn't be overlooked. You're exactly who I made this channel for.